were expected to
our own, let's see, understand. I have.
I cannot.
I completely
You're audible, sir. You're audible.
I completely agree with your statement that there must be more constant policy than politicking. Well, I will make an observation and then I'll ask my question. I hope you won't mind it.
Please,
now
go on.
the audience, I won't take long. You see, when you read the history of India, what you find is that the original inhabitants of India are the Adivasis. They are the ones who are supposed to be here even before the Dravidians came. And later, it was the Aryans who conquered the Dravidians, especially in the north, and you find their bastion is now in the south. Now, what have we done all these years, these 75 years after independence and even these 9 years to mitigate their suffering? And if you take the reasonable poverty line, not the Indian poverty line, you'll find about 50% of our population are really underprivileged and are, you can call them below the poverty line or just at that level. Now, what have we done? We haven't done much for them. This is my own feeling. I was looking up Google for some statistics, and what I found was that today the gap between the rich and the poor in the last 5 years has increased. And you have some of the richest men in the world in India today. And I find that every time we pay lip sympathy to this 50%, but we haven't done anything as a real matter of policy, where you'll tackle this on a kind of a war footing. Now, am I right in my observation? And what do you think about this?
No, I prefer standing. Basic energy won't go. I disagree fundamentally with your question. The opening factual assumptions are thoroughly factually inaccurate. On the issue of Adivasi, on the definition of Adivasi, on the use of the word Dravidian, and on your belief in the Aryan invasion theory, I fully disagree. Completely. I'll explain, sir. I'll explain my position. I am not a geneticist. I am not an archaeologist. I don't have a functional training or even a basic training of anthropology. So with these caveats and disclaimers, allow me to spell out what I've understood based on the literature. There has never been a more diabolical hoax in the history of this country than the invention of the Aryan invasion theory. The pernicious hoax that it has and the kind of damage it has caused to this country. Unbelievable. The use of the word Adivasi is based on the European colonizer's projection of his behavior on this country, where he believes that since I have colonized a certain society, people preceding me would have also followed suit in that particular sense, and they would have also resorted to colonization. And the word Adivasi was coined by them, was never used by us. When you use words like Adivasi and Mool Nivasi, you are entrenching and creating the notion, or the other way around, that we are all akin to the European colonizer. It's only a question of time difference. He came later, but we came before, but we did the same thing that he did to us. The history on this particular subject tells you that this is not the truth, They did not have any scientific basis to start this. For the last 150 years, not 75 years, for the last 150 years, we have been fighting this myth which was fabricated without any basis. So, barely a week ago at the Tamil Nadu Dialogues, I had the opportunity to deliver a 1-hour lecture capturing the journey of this absolute toxic concept called Dravidianism, starting from 1800s right until the Sabarimala movement, based on very clear literature, saying how it was fabricated by the missionaries. With evidence, I can cite the evidence, I can cite the books. And some of those books were written by them, saying this is a hoax. So, Aryan invasion theory should never be the starting point of a discussion when it comes to Janajatis or Panchamas according to us. The language that we use is Panchamas because they cannot be fit under the Chaturvarna system. That's largely the definition, or let's say the term that is used for them. Second, the world is revisiting questions of development and progress after having made all the mistakes that the West has forced upon us. Learning very clearly that while the West has a lot to offer from the perspective of what they see as science, so on and so forth, their understanding of nature and how to protect nature-based communities is absolutely zero compared to us. They don't know how to respect nature. Every model of development that is based on the Western model is constantly based on exponential, continuous, ceaseless, relentless growth. And in the long run, it will see Bangalorification of Mysore. And that's how it starts. We judge the value of all these developments, so to speak, on the basis of the immediate, let's say, benefits that we get because we are stakeholders in the system. But when you move perhaps 60,000 feet above and you ask, what is the overall picture? You will see only destruction across the board. So does this mean I'm saying leave them alone? Don't they need health care? No, I'm not saying any of those things. Don't they need access to medical facilities? I'm making none of those statements. I'm only saying the discussion need not be in these binaries. The choice is not between the West and glorification of poverty. The truth always lies in the middle. If I may, I'll just finish my point. The concept of restrained consumption and the concept of respect for non-human beings, as long as that is not drilled as part of our development discourse, you will see that we are penny wise and pound foolish in the long run. How do we go about addressing this issue? One, the hypercity model is destructive. Creation of cities beyond a point is not sustainable. Then the hope is that you try and create an economy which does two things. Prevents migration from the so-called rural centers to urban centers beyond a point. And two, nature-based economy needs to be revisited and reconsidered. You can use technology to further these goals. But if technology takes the center stage beyond a point, as a former engineer who practices intellectual property, which is perhaps the most capitalistic form of property possible, I know what exactly happens in pharma industries and other places. Take it from me when I say this. It's a house of glass waiting to crumble. If the last 6 months have told us anything about this entire hyper-vaccination drive that we were pushed into over the last 2 years, it is that science is capable of being fabricated, even in the most critical of subjects. From climate change to pandemic, nothing is an exception to this rule, because the moment you have the MNC interest stepping into the picture, I am not a communist. I am not a communist. But I know exactly how the corporate interests work. So we really need to go back to the basics in terms of understanding what did we do right to respect nature and also improve the quality of life. I'm not saying change the definition in such a way that bad looks good. I'm not suggesting that. But do not subscribe to these notions is all I'm going to say. You had a follow-up question, please go ahead and ask.
Yes,
Please use the mic.
I just want to clarify.
Yes, sir, yes.
You see, I got my facts from Google.
Okay.
And that is one which I think most people now refer to.
Right.
So I feel you should write to Google.
Okay.
Honestly.
Okay.
Seriously.
Okay.
Because after all, most of us are guided by
Right,
Google.
right.
It's such a handy thing.
Right,
And
right.
it's right in the palm of your hand. You can
Right.
always switch it on and then see it. So please do write to the Google, but you still haven't told me
Yes.
who are the original inhabitants of India.
Okay. ठीक.
And exactly how has the whole history worked out.
Okay.
But I will not continue with this because
Right.
I know others want to ask
Sure,
questions.
sure.
Please let them do so.
Very short, crisp answer. Read the first section of my first book. I've explained this in detail.
First section.
First section of my first book.
First section of your
First book. This is the
Okay.
precise issue that I've addressed.
Okay.
Citing literature. You don't need to go to Google. Come to JSD. I've addressed this, citing missionary literature, citing literature of anthropologists who visited all the tribal areas in India, and these are Mexican anthropologists and researchers have come and said, it's so horrendous in this country that almost every tribal district is divided like beggar colonies between missionaries and evangelicals, between Anglicans and Lutherans and this church and that church, so on and so forth. And they have an almanac of sorts that these are the number of souls that have been harvested each year. I will show this from their own literature. Nobody can challenge me on these facts. Nobody can even think of initiating legal action against me because the book has been around for 1.5 years now. The facts have been in public domain. Nobody has had the guts to call me on these facts. Because I followed the principle of marshalling evidence the way a lawyer does in the court of law. The original structure of the book was meant to be in the form of a submission which is captured before the Supreme Court on how history has done injustice to this country and its civilization. But I thought it would be too dramatic. And I wanted this book to enter the portals of few academic institutions. Unfortunately or fortunately, both the books have made it to the Cambridge Library database. And I said, you guys read it, you need it more than anybody else. So it's not a matter of pride for me whether Cambridge reads or not, because I wanted my people to read this first, so that the myths in their heads are busted first. My audience will always remain my people first, because if they get their facts right, I hope that it translates to more enlightened conversations. So pardon me for disagreeing with you, but these are the facts, sir. This is where I stand. I'm fairly backed by evidence on my position. Next.